Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Iblis Manifestations Podcast. I'm honored to be hosting the very first interview of this format, meaning the video and audio format, for none other than no one. He is the driving force, the creative director, the founder, the vocalist, for the black metal entity which is known as the Sun's Journey Through the Night. In the last few years, coming from the UK, they have managed to make quite a bit of notoriety for themselves. And I believe that with their new album on the way, there's going to be a lot more noise surrounding this band. So, of course, I'm honored to be hosting this. No one and I had a very good conversation. We talked about a lot of different things, but also we covered a lot of the basics as well, which perhaps might have been missing from their public appearances, as they have been a very mysterious entity thus far and still remain to be so to an extent. And of course, we talked about their new album, and the album is going to be called Worldless. So we got to talk about that. We got to talk about the meaning of the band's name and what even inspired this project, some of the personal events that might have led into the creation of such an entity, and what we can expect to be coming out of this particular journey, the Sun's Journey Through the Night, that is. So, before we go into the conversation, I wanted to thank you all very much for joining us on Iblis Manifestations. If you are new to the channel, please feel free to subscribe or share the content around, and do keep in mind that we have tons of interviews and conversations such as this one throughout the back catalog of the channel, which is now going further back as much as, well, over a year, which is absolutely fucking bizarre to think, but here we are anyway. We've got interviews with bands like Oculus, Fetus Inversa, Darvaza, Miss Therming, you name it. Boltzer, Watain, everyone's in here. So if you haven't checked out any of those, please feel free to do so. But I just wanted to take that moment to thank you all very much for joining us, and I hope you will enjoy this episode. Now, let's get straight into it. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome no one to Iblis Manifestations. Good evening, no one. Welcome to Iblis Manifestations. How are you doing?
Good evening. I'm very good. How are you?
Fantastic. Well, first of all, I'm honored to actually have the privilege of hosting you for the very first interview of this type that you have done. Obviously, the band has generated a lot of buzz in the last few years, which is, I guess, it's been around for that time. Anyway, and you know, it's I'm very much curious to sort of dig deeper into what's behind this very mysterious entity, which is the Sun's Journey Through the Night. So, yeah, there's a lot of things I want to ask you about, but let's perhaps just start with the basics. I'm absolutely fascinated with the name of the band. So just tell me a little bit about where that comes from and what it's sort of trying to relay, what type of image or concept it's trying to put out there.
I mean, there's a short answer and there's a long answer to that. I'll give the long answer first. Really, is that I've been fascinated by everything space, everything space related for as long as I can remember. One of my very first memories is watching Star Wars as a kid, which kind of brings a lot of influence into this project, I think, anyway. Being obsessed with Darth Vader, all that kind of stuff. But it's actually the answer really is that I pulled the old metal trick of taking the name from another band's album song. There was a band back in the day called Hammers, which is a great band name. But they had an EP, I think, was called The Sun's Journey Through the Night. I remember seeing it. I think it must have been, 2004, 2003, something like that. So long ago, and always having this title stuck in my head. The Sun's Journey Through the Night, The Sun's Journey Through the Night. I'm thinking it was great. And I love long band names anyway. I love that sort of stuff where bands like Godspeed You Black Emperor and stuff like that. So I always love those long band names. So when it came to naming this project, that I didn't really think was going to ever get anyone really listening to it. When I started, I just kind of did it started a bit of fun. I thought, well, what do I call it? And that came to mind, The Sun's Journey Through the Night, that EP from many, many years ago that was still kind of rattling around inside my head. When I first started, I didn't even really start writing cosmic black metal. I was just writing slow, sludgy, doomy stuff that was more akin to like bands like Naught and bands like that. So I just loved that. It just kept on coming back to me whenever I thought of band titles and stuff like that. And because I didn't really think it was gonna be a serious thing, I didn't think that it would get anyone listening to it. I just rolled with it because I thought, okay, it's a really cool name. I'm gonna go with that for now. And then 4 years later, here we are. And I've got to now explain that. So yeah, that's where the band name actually comes from.
Very interesting. So what does it actually mean to you then? Is there like a particular sort of image or anything that comes to mind that you're particularly trying to put out there? What's the meaning of that name to you personally?
I think when I think of it, I think of when I'm very much fascinated with space. I'm very much fascinated by everything that's out there and everything that's not out there. When I think of it, there's a video that I saw a while back, which was kind of what people think our solar system looks like, of the sun and all the planets going around it. But when it actually is the sun flying through space with everything kind of circling around it as it goes. And I never thought of it that way. So sometimes I think of that and I kind of think of, wow, like everything's moving at this insane speed and we don't feel it. There's all these incredible forces and stories out there that we have no idea are even happening on this tiny, tiny little level, but also on this gigantic, incredible scale. I also, when I very first started the project, one of the things that I wanted to do was score this video I'd found where it was called like the time lapse of the end of the universe, where it showed what scientists essentially kind of believe is the time frame of from now to everything just dying, like everything dying, even black holes ceasing to exist.
I have seen that actually. I think if I'm correct, isn't it narrated by Alec Baldwin, perhaps?
I think maybe so. Yeah, I found it on YouTube many years ago. It was probably around about the time that I started the project in 2019. And
sure. Yeah, I don't think that anyone got shot during the making of that, but it is a very fascinating video indeed.
No, but maybe the person who made it, when he realized just how futile everything seems when you kind of look at the grandeur and grand scheme of the plan that the universe has for everything in it, which is kind of another one of the things that kind of keeps bringing me back to space when it comes to writing with Sun's Journey. It's that sort of stuff of thinking the possibilities out there are absolutely endless. So there's so much stuff that I can write about, and also there's so much we don't know, which means that there's so much that's still possible that we can't properly conceive yet. So I try and put as much of that sort of stuff into my writing as possible.
Well, actually, I think that very much goes hand in hand because there are many things about your band or project, whatever you want to call it, that are very much unknown to people. So I guess that kind of works out very well. There's a nice parallel there. How intentional was it to take that kind of approach with the band?
I mean, quite intentional. In the past, I'd never really done black metal before. And this is something I've been building up to for probably about 20 years of building up to doing this project. I was, I don't know how old I must have been, but listening to Seol by Nagelfar on the train on the way to college back when I was a kid. And thinking, wow, like this is the first time I've listened to genuinely scary, like dark metal. Because obviously we'd come out at the age of nu metal at that time, which was kind of like a bit of like a clown show. And listening to this insanely dark stuff was like, wow, that was my introduction to it really, along with like early Behemoth and stuff like that. But I kind of, you know what it's like when you live in a small town and the musicians you have as friends are kind of your pool of the people you write with, the people that you end up going into bands with. And the guys who I was friends with and the guys who I formed bands with back then were more into like hardcore bands, like not hardcore, like, Gorilla Biscuits and stuff like that, but more stuff like Every Time I Die, The Chariot, Norma Jean, all that kind of stuff that came out of the early 2000s. And I somewhat enjoyed it. I somewhat enjoyed the kind of like the chaos of it all. But I always wanted to do something like this. I always wanted to have something darker, always wanted to have something more intense. And I never felt like I could go. I never felt like it was intense enough with those other bands. And then when I started writing by myself in 2019, this project just came out of me, and it was quite unintentional at the very start. But then once I kind of found my feet with it, it was like, oh, this is the stuff that I've wanted to write for the past like 20 years, ever since started to listen to black metal when I was probably 15, 14 years old.
Yeah, no, I completely appreciate that. And you know what? I relate to that as well, in the sense that when I was back in Iran and we had the original lineup for Trivax, it's not like everyone else in the band was into black metal. Like, there was the drummer, he was just into like some fucking pop rock bullshit, and then the bass player was into Metallica. He was like the biggest Metallica fanboy ever. And then there I was listening to fucking Behexen. Like on like the bootleg copies that I managed to get hold of. I do feel like I relate to that sense of not necessarily frustration, but just like sort of like you could do something different on your own terms. So when it came to 2019, which I guess was the inception of this particular movement, if you will, was there any kind of, because you said that you alluded to the fact that it was something that came out of you very naturally. Was there any kind of, I suppose, event or any kind of personal life situation that ended up becoming a spillover into black metal? Because there's gotta be, for me, and perhaps this doesn't have to be the case for everyone, but the way I look at black metal is that it is catharsis of its utmost format, really. It's one of the only places where you get to really dig deep into the darkest parts of yourself and be able to sonically pour them out into space, which again, I guess that's appropriate for what you do. Was there anything in particular that you think led to what became this project?
I kind of fell out of black metal for a while, and I listened to a whole bunch of, I went through a real classical kind of phase where I really listened to a lot of classical music, and I love composers like Hans Zimmer. and people like that who do like film scores. In my day-to-day life outside of wearing this mask, I work with film. I work in video, so film scores are a big thing for me. So I went through a real big phase of listening to all of that sort of stuff. But in 2019, it would have been the end of 2018 or start of 2019. I listened to a album by a band called From the Bogs of Alkishka, an Irish band, and absolutely pulled me back into the world of black metal. And through that band, I found bands like Crimson Throne, and that led me down the path into listening to more raw black metal, which I'd never really listened to before. I'd never really listened to really raw black metal. It'd all been quite polished. I mean, I think stuff like, even like Nagelfar back in the day with that album Sheol, I think it's called, I think that's how it's pronounced, Sheol. You can't listen to it on Apple Music or anything like that. It's on YouTube. It was abrasive and very visceral, but still quite polished compared to the bands that I started to find. So the two bands that I found that kind of made me think, I can do this, I can pick up a guitar and I can write this stuff, was Dark Space and Paysage Diva. Obviously the two projects of Winter. So I found those two projects, and I'm a huge Godspeed You Black Emperor fan. I love those long droning songs. I love how hypnotic they are. And I found that with Winter's work in Dark Space and Paysage. So listening to that stuff, I was immediately just like, this is a blend of these two worlds of music that I absolutely love. This hypnotic, long, droning, gloomy music, but then also this abrasive, visceral, dark music that I can kind of, when I close my eyes, I know exactly where they want me to be. You know, I'm there on that album cover on that snowy hillside, looking out over mountains. It transported me. So listening to that made me want to pick up a guitar, because I'm not really, I mean, I've said a fair few times in interviews and stuff like that, I would never class myself as a guitarist. I'd very loosely class myself as a musician. I'm more of the type of person who can pick something up and I can hit it until it makes the sound I want it to. So that's kind of what I do. And it took me a long time to kind of find the sound of Sun's Journey, because I was trying to sound like more traditional black metal, I would say, quite riffy. I'm not very good with riffs. I mean, if you listen to everything up to the new album, it's all quite riffless. There's a couple of little things here and there, but for the most part, it's what I say to everyone, it's sad chords played fast, which is what I really enjoyed playing. So, but because that's kind of how I learned guitar, was just, you know, learning songs on guitar that I like. A lot of songs by The Cure, a lot of songs by Joy Division.
Yes.
And from that, I came to love all those sad chords that they used. So when it came to writing, the only stuff I really knew was, all right, sad chords. So that's what ended up kind of creating the sound of Sun's Journey. So really, I mean, circling back to the question, it was, you know, falling back in love with black metal via bands like From the Bugs of Alkishka, who I've name dropped at every available opportunity because they are fantastic. Crimson Throne, and you know, Thomas from Crimson Throne and Dan, they've been big supporters of the project since before I even released anything. And yeah, like then finding Winter's work with Dark Space and stuff like that, it was kind of that trajectory that made me think, right, I've got to pick up a guitar and I have to try and do this. I have to try and write this sort of stuff. And it was listening to Dark Space that made me think, it doesn't have to be insanely polished. It doesn't have to sound perfect. It just has to be what it is. It just has to be abrasive. It just has to be visceral. It just has to grab my ear in the right way. And it was probably the first time I'd ever sat and wrote music and really didn't give a shit what anyone else thought of what it sounded like, or the guitar tone's this, or the drums sound like shit, or anything like that. It was the first time I properly didn't care I think that's kind of that was a big thing for me, is really letting go of that outsider's view of what I do. So I mean, there was a lot of that, and bands like Dark Space were a big influence on that thought, I think.
Do you think that, I mean, that's the absolute spirit of black metal in a sense, so I really can't fault that approach. But do you also think that the fact that it's an anonymous project makes it easier to take that approach, where you just don't give a shit about what anyone thinks?
Yeah, I mean, massively. I mean, there are many reasons why I went anonymous right from the start. One of them was because I haven't got the thickest skin in the world when it comes to my creative output, and it's something that I've had to work on over the years, especially with my day job being creating videos and stuff like that, and working in the film industry. It is something that I've had to kind of learn, and I've had to get better at. So I mean, maybe that definitely, I mean, it would certainly play into it, I think, anyway.
No, I feel that, man. That's interesting. That's actually very interesting to hear that. And you were mentioning to me before we went on that you actually created the video yourself as well for the well, I think that will have been out by the time this interview comes out, actually, for Voidwalker.
Yeah. So Voidwalker, I think it got announced today, and the album got announced today.
That's right.
We kind of brought a few things forward, so yeah, it's been announced.
Yeah, fantastic. Have you released the actual video as well?
The single and video comes out on the 5th of May. So I mean,
on the 5th of May. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think by the time I think by the time this comes out, it will be out and people would have seen it. And I mean, I've always done basically everything in Sun's journey, from imagery, video, and audio up to this point. It made sense for me to obviously do the video side of things. So I had quite a specific vision of what I wanted it to look like. I wanted it to be dark and chaotic, but I wanted it to match the music. You know, I mean, and I think it does that. I think it does it quite well. It was also an idea that I wanted to do for other bands that I never had the chance to do. So I used it for my own band.
You know, I actually think that this video adds so much prestige to the Sun's journey. I think that it very much complements the, I guess, the integrity of the newer music, especially because I said this to you as well. I said that the production it's so much better than I think it is on the other ones. Obviously, the production, we can both probably agree that is quite intentional with the previous releases, but on this one, I think it does your songwriting a bit more justice for sure. And obviously, if people want to hear something a bit different, then they can obviously revisit the previous records. But I think that when you have a video like that, I don't know what it is. Like, a music video can make or break a song. And I was just talking about this to someone earlier about some of the new Metallica stuff. I know it's not exactly quite applicable in a black metal context, but it is true. You know, like, you see a song and then the video is shit, so you just don't like the song, but then it's only when you hear that song live and then you think, oh fuck, this actually sounds pretty cool. And I think what you've done with this one, I think the video makes the song sound better than it would if you listen to it on its own. So I think you definitely accomplished the execution of that, I would say. And I can imagine also, now hearing your perspective about working as a videographer, and I guess having a difficulty with some feedback and whatnot, I can only imagine how liberating it must have been to create your own music video where you get to choose and decide exactly what goes, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I did debate whether I was going to bring someone else into this in order to create a music video, because I thought, I'm too close to the project, I'm going to be overly critical, but it's something that as I say, I have to take a step back, I have to look at it objectively, and you know, I'm glad that you feel that it complements the song well. I mean, it made sense to do a music video and start doing music videos for this project. It's all part of kind of what I want to do in terms of not so much about improving the projects. I don't really think that improving is a thing that we can really. I don't think that should be a game. I don't think that should be a goal. I think legitimizing it is definitely part of what I want to do, because in 2020 we saw a massive increase of one-man black metal bands due to the pandemic, and since then I've kind of wanted to legitimize it into what I would feel is no longer of that era of black metal. We've got some amazing projects that have actually now go on to legitimize themselves. I mean, look at Abduction. I was
just going to make the example of Abduction, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, me and AV, we talk, and he's a fantastic artist, and he's another person who I've looked to since the start to kind of see as like a bit of a barometer for quality. And if you look from what he's done of going from those initial, his initial album all the way up to where he's now with Black Blood, he's just legitimized it. So in my mind, that's what he's done. It's not a goal. It's not a journey of we have to improve. It's more like evolution and legitimacy behind it. So that's how you end up playing to these bigger crowds, how you reach a wider audience, and how you kind of pull yourself up and into the world of bands like let's take a few for example, like the Hexen, Dark Space. I mean, like all these bands are playing these amazing venues and touring, and I think that's how you kind of go about doing that. But I'm really happy with kind of where things are. It's still Sun's journey in every sense of the project. You can just hear everything now. Whereas I think before, my vocals were quite intentionally buried beneath a blanket of distortion and all sorts of other mess, which worked aesthetically with those previous albums like Crawling Nebula and Eternal Black Transmissions are, they're kind of supposed to be nasty. They're supposed to be quite, I was aiming for claustrophobic. I really wanted to feel like that sound was not something you could escape from. On the new album, we've worked incredibly hard to maintain that feeling of aggression on the music without it sounding too polished. I mean, I don't like when bands sound polished. I still want to treat it like almost like it's a bit of like a punk band. Like I like the scrappiness of that sort of production. Yeah, and it just brings like an energy that I think overly polished music. You can appreciate the musicianship, but there's no hairs on the back of your neck. You know what I mean? Like for me anyway, when something's overly polished, it may as well be a pop album. That's what I love about black metal is it's almost like everyone's welcome when it comes to the conversation of quality of production, because it's like no one's really paying that much attention to it. They're really just listening to the music, and the production can almost be it's a part of it. It's a massive part of it. And I think that's what's great about this music is that it's almost like everyone's welcome in terms of that sort of production. I think that's fantastic. It's one of the reasons why I love it so much.
I think for me, yes, I do agree with that in the sense that I think, like you said, the production is simply a tool. It's an extension of the music. And that's there to aid the music be the best version of itself that it can be. Some music requires to sound different ways than others. Some riffs require to sound different than others. Like for example, I guess Watain would probably be a really good example, because the production on Lawless Darkness is absolutely suitable for those riffs and those kind of beats. And then the production on the last album is absolutely suitable for that. But they are almost completely different from one another. Maybe not entirely, but there's very obvious differences between them. So I'm with you on that, and I think I'm not into the idea of getting fixated on such a thing, other than just using it as a tool, really. And the only thing I will say in regards to, I appreciate the word you used for it is legitimizing it. And obviously, I still haven't had the privilege of seeing you guys yet, but we're going to be sharing the stage a couple of times soon, so I'm sure that I'll have the opportunity to do that very soon. Very much looking forward to those, by the way. Yeah, should be good, man. But I think one thing that I have, and this is sort of, it's not even necessarily a criticism, but just something that I'm always very aware of. And it's that when you have bands, or rather projects, that go from being one person or two people, and then there's all of a sudden a full lineup around it, and then the project has already gathered some kind of, I guess, momentum beforehand. The thing with that for me is that a lot of these kind of projects can sound great on the record, but then when you see it live, there's no real energy. There's only like one person on stage that really gives a fuck about what's going on, you know. And you see this a lot especially in the realm of black metal. I've seen it so many times over the years. It's even happened to bands that I have been a part of, you know, and then you can tell who on stage writes the music. It becomes a very obvious thing. And actually, you know what? I gotta say, I mean, they're friends of ours, you know, so, and this is, again, not necessarily criticism, but even in the case of Abduction, when they first became a full band, they were not that interesting to watch live because they hadn't developed that chemistry. They hadn't shared the road together yet. They just didn't have that energy, that oomph. It was more just something that you would stand and watch rather than something that you would feel. Whereas now that some time has gone past, like when we just played with them in Nottingham last month, they were so much better. You know, that those riffs actually, they feel live. They have more life to them because now it's the members of the band that are putting their energy in there. But I think that chemistry is something that far too often is missing from not just black metal, but I guess all strains of music. And that's something that I think is extremely important, that you need to have that chemistry, that you need to feel something when you see a band live. How much would you say that is important to you in having that chemistry in your project?
It's vastly important, and I absolutely cannot stress how important that is to me. The fact of the matter is that I'm wearing a mask, so you can't see my face when I'm screaming these lyrics, and you can't see the energy I'm putting in with my face. So I have to be quite animated with everything else. I'm very fortunate that the live members of The Sun Shining Through the Night are actually some of my closest friends who I've played with for probably 20 years. I've known these guys for, they were at my wedding. They're one of them was my best man. They're my brothers. You know, they're I managed to keep the project secret from them for 2 years before they kind of went, you're that guy. Oh, you're this guy. Okay, of course it is, you spooky bastard. Yeah, of course it's you.
All right.
So I played in bands with these guys before, and the band that we kind of last played in was, we were known as basically a live band, like on record. I always liked what we did, but our live shows were where we were known for quite crazy live shows. You know, it was akin to, if you ever heard of bands like The Chariot, where it's just their live shows. If you look at, like, if you go on YouTube and search for The Chariot Russia live, it's the most insane thing I've ever seen. They barely actually play like a proper note. They're just going fucking crazy.
I need to see that.
The crowd go mental as well. It's so even if you're not really into the music, it's cool. But if you watch that live show, it's just incredible. That was the benchmark we were trying to get to. I mean, bear in mind, back then I was 22, 23, something like that, and now I'm 34. So I can't quite do all the stuff that I was doing back in the day. You know, you become a dad and you get older, so you get a bit stiffer and you have to start stretching. But you know, I try and bring some of that energy, and that word cathartic that you mentioned earlier. It's a word that I try and weave throughout this project, because to me, that's kind of what I get from the music. That's what I get from Sun's journey. I get a big catharsis from writing this stuff. I get a big catharsis from playing it. I get a big catharsis from listening to it. So playing it live, especially with people who I've known for 20 years, who I trust, I probably trust more than anyone in the world. When it came to putting together the live band, there was no one else I was going to ask other than the guys who are currently doing it. So I am in a very fortunate place where they get it straight away, and they've brought that energy that we had back in our previous band through into this project. And I think if you look at the video for Voidwalker, which obviously be out by this point, you can see a spark of that energy. You can see it. Obviously it's through a screen, and it's quite veiled, that music video, but I think you get a kind of sense of the energy that we have live, and the chemistry as well. As I say, like, I've known these guys for many years, and when it came to putting this project together for a live show, they were the only ones who I thought of, and I'm very fortunate that they've not only done the live aspect of this project with me, but a couple of them have actually co-wrote the new album with me, which is as I say, it's another step forward for this project.
That's fantastic to hear, man. Excellent. I'm now really looking forward to seeing you guys. And actually, it's interesting, like the whole catharsis thing. I think that's actually very evident from some of the stuff that you're doing. Even though I don't know the lyrics, even though I'm yet to see you live in person, I already get that sort of, that I already feel that there's definitely, it's almost like that very anxious, but also, like you said, abrasive expression, which is there for yourself and the band. And I did actually watch some live videos, at least, of you guys, and yeah, it was interesting to me, your approach. And you know what's funny as well, and this is, don't take this as a negative thing, but I remember watching that show. I can't remember where it was. It might have been the London gig that you actually did with Abduction, and I think Lamp of Murmur, if I'm correct. And I remember watching you and sort of observing the body language and thinking to myself, I wonder if this is someone who's always played black metal, because that's not the usual kind of movements, like very subtle things that, perhaps like only if you've been paying attention to this for many years you would find. But one thing that was evident just from watching that to me was this sort of, I suppose, this anxious rage that seemed to exist in there. Is that something that you have always felt? Is that something that you've always strived for as an artist? Is there, what's the source behind that, really?
I think probably the best word for it is frantic. It's always quite frantic how I generally tend to act on stage. There's multiple sources for kind of where that comes from. My dad was it still is, and by proxy, so am I, a massive Joy Division fan. So growing up watching those videos of Ian Curtis, kind of doing his twitching dance on stage, was like, I fell in love with that, and I found it so interesting. It was like a play on the fact that he had these seizures and he had epilepsy, and it was tragic to watch, but also just like he's like a snake. He's just hypnotic. I always loved that kind of frantic energy on stage, and I think that when I get on stage, it's more of a shedding something that I have to keep on. This is probably quite trite in comparison to, many artists probably say the same thing as me, but it's a shedding of something I have to keep layered all the rest of the time. But then I can take off that layer, and I can just I can let that side out. That's what this is for me. This, me putting a layer on is almost me taking a layer off. By me putting this mask on, I can be far more honest about my artistic intent and my view of the world, my view of music, my view of art and all that kind of stuff than I can be when I've not got this on. So it's a bit of I think the word for it is an oxymoron. I put the mask on, it's almost like I'm taking one off. So that's kind of what it feels like on stage for me. The only thing I don't like about it on stage is the fact that it's actually quite constricting having this mask on. And back in the older band, obviously I didn't have a mask on, and I could just go berserk, and I'd throw myself into things, throw shit everywhere, and go a bit mad. But with this on, I can't really see great. I can see details, I can see bits and bobs, but I can't see everything. So, especially if I headbang, the straps don't come under the chin, they just go around the back of my head. So if I headbang too much, it's just going to come off. So I am somewhat.
But you can still see my mustache right now, right?
I can still see your mustache. I can see the great background. I can see the nice side lighting you've got going on. I can see all of that. Yeah, it's just I try not to risk the unthinkable of me headbanging and my mask going flying off into the photo pit or into the crowd or anything like that, because then I've got to take this off to find it, and that kind of ruins the pantomime, ruins the act for the people who are there to see this and not the guy beneath it.
Sure, yeah, I understand that. I think it's one of them things you can't really overthink that sort of stuff anyway. Yeah, and also this light, this is just, I've got Jesus sat next to me, so that's actually what it is. But
amazing. Hi, dude.
Yes, he says hola. See, but no, on a serious note, the thing that I find interesting is from what you're saying. That's a very, very interesting quote when you say that when you put on the mask, it's almost like taking one off. I think that's really fascinating to me. And I think there's this thing, and I suppose this is perhaps a little bit more prevalent in the British society over here anyway, because I've spent a long time here now, 11 years I've been on these islands. And, the thing that's interesting is, I guess, when you go through society, there's always this sense of, there's all the social etiquettes that you kind of have to follow, which are nice, it's great, but it's almost like sometimes it's a little overly nice. So there's being respectful, but then there's being too nice. And I think that's definitely something that I think over here, not a lot of people really get to express, or rather exercise their emotions properly. And it's a
very British thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's definitely something that I've noticed, obviously coming from a country where everyone is very much into just like, you go to any house party and then people will just put on a song and then everyone will just start like dancing together, like really happy and very expressive and very emotional, and that's actually one of the things. And I'm not even saying that I prefer one over the other, because I'm still a massive black sheep everywhere that I go in the world, whether it's back home or here, even though obviously I've not been there for many, many years now. But the thing is that I guess it's perhaps why it's so important to find an outlet like this, the catharsis like this, because, like sometimes as well, you might be in a workplace and then someone will come up to you and then perhaps they might criticize some work that you've done, which you might be proud of. But then they might not see it that way, and it's not their profession to see it that way. So then perhaps they might say something that might invoke a sense of frustration in you. And you don't really live in a world where the rational response to that would be to just turn around and slap him in the fucking face or put him in a triangle hold. So even though perhaps sometimes you might wish that was. So I think that's, the way I've always looked at black metal is that there's many of these things that sort of happen throughout life. Positive or negative, but perhaps mostly the negative things that you kind of remember. I feel like black metal is the one place where you get to place the bank of all of those negative experiences in one place through an outward projection. And I don't know how much you relate to that, but that's kind of how I've always personally seen the whole thing of black metal. And of course, it can also be very empowering, but it is very much I guess, a way to exchange the things that we go through in life, and then we can then turn it around in the shape of a nice middle finger and then throw it back out into the world.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that for me, I think I mean, going back to the British, I mean, we're a very passive aggressive people. We'd much rather write a song about someone who's pissed us off or something like that, or something bad that's happened to us, than actually deal with it. Because that means confrontation, and the British aren't very good at that.
That's right.
When it comes to the petty stuff, anyway, when it comes to stuff that doesn't truly matter. The way that I tend to deal with it is every Son's Journey song, album, release has two meanings. Every single one has what I call a split narrative. So I don't feel like I can be. I mean, this kind of goes back to the whole. I put on one mask and I take another off. It kind of goes back to that, where for me to write about personal things, for me to write about the things that have truly affected me negatively through my life, I have to take it. I have to rewrite it in this other world, this world that I've kind of written for this project, this kind of story that I've kind of written for it. I have to kind of transpose the personal pain and grief into this other story before I can tell it. Because to me, I don't think that style of lyric would work. That completely blunt, honest, very literal, on the nose lyric. I don't think that would work with the style of this project for me. So I have to exchange it. I have to put it into my brain, and what I get back is a story. Another chapter in the story that I've been writing for this project since 2019. So it's another way of me veiling myself, and actually it's a way of me protecting myself, which I suppose, as I say, it's a way of me putting on another mask. It's me kind of masking what the true meaning of those songs actually is. But it's also about I love world building. I love writing stories, and I've always loved, as I'm a massive fan of film. So it was almost like a way of me scratching two itches doing it that way. I get to get all this horrible personal stuff out, and it also allows me to use that pain and use that anger and all the negative emotions and turn it into something else other than just the music. I mean, I've been quite open about what the Black Pyramid was about. So that single came out, I think it was January 2022. 22. Yeah, Christ, that really does go by. I've been quite open about it because I wanted to choose that moment to raise money for the Birmingham Children's Hospital, who cared for my son, because my son had to have an operation. So I was quite open with the fact that the Black Pyramid was about this thing that was happening in my life. But also, if you listen to it and you listen to the lyrics and you read the lyrics, you wouldn't really be able to pinpoint that that's what I'm talking about, because it actually transposed and exchanged into another chapter in this story that I'm writing that encompasses the entire project. So that's kind of how I get that exchange. And I really like that. I really like that word you use of it's an exchange. I really like that. It's almost like your negative emotions and your grief and your pain is a currency that you get to cash in and then you get back this art, or you get back these lyrics. So even if it's just a word or a chord or one riff, it's still an exchange. I really like that. I really like that imagery of thinking of it that way.
Absolutely. That calling pain a currency is that I've always said that, like you can look at that in so many different aspects of life. Like you think of what's the most painful thing a human being could ever go through. Well, childbirth. Well, what's the reward? Life. Literally life. And I think that's it's a very, very, very fascinating thing. And I appreciate your perspective on that as well, because as an artist, sometimes by revealing too much, perhaps you'll have nothing left anymore. Like you almost need that little bit of a metal barrier between you and the audience. And sometimes they can perceive things the wrong way. So someone else might listen to Black Pyramid, and then they might have a completely different struggle in their own life, but then they'll still be able to relate to it through that.
Yeah, I quite like that people can put their own meanings on things. It can mean something different to each and every person who listens to it. And I mean, you're right. I mean, I don't think I'll ever run out of things to speak about in that way that kind of come from an emotional place. But to me, there truly is nothing worse than watching an artist who comes out with all of that incredible raw emotion. I mean, let's take. I mean, from outside of black metal, let's take, I don't know, Eminem. I'm a huge hip hop fan. I love hip hop. I love rap.
Sure.
I mean, MF Doom is another big reason why I wear a mask. I love that. I love MF Doom. I love hip hop. But let's just take Eminem. I mean, when he released the Marshall Mathers LP, it blew my fucking mind. I mean, listening to his lyrics and how fucking angry that guy was, it was just like, that's what made me want to write that sort of kind of visceral, literally feels like someone is scream spitting in your face, like that sort of music. And then you listen to it as it goes on, it just turns into quite, empty. And there's nothing to it anymore. There's no anger, there's no venom behind the words, and it just becomes almost like pedestrian hip hop. When once it starts turning off into the later albums. So I try and be mindful of that and try and make sure that I'm always writing from a personal place where I can do that exchange. And if I'm just getting something for nothing, it's going to be empty when I have it. So that's why I really enjoy that perspective of it being an exchange. It's giving me a lot to think about. I haven't really properly thought about it before, so.
That's what we get on these podcasts, man. That's what Iblis Manifestations is all about.
Yeah, man. It's awesome.
So, just as a form of a conclusion, I suppose, what is it that you hope that people would take away from the sun's journey through the night?
That's a difficult question. I mean,
I do understand that. I guess at the very basic of it, it's a personal catharsis for yourself and just a tool and a way of expressing yourself, which I guess that would probably be its first and foremost mission above all other things, and that's the function. And obviously getting to perform with, as you've now said, your very old friends and people who are very close to you in that band. But just in the grand scheme of things, what is it that you're hoping to leave behind? Or are there any regards into the effect which you're trying to leave behind with this band?
I think what I'm trying to do with Sun's Journey, and I don't want to make it sound overtly pretentious and like I'm doing more than what there is, but I'm trying to world build. I'm trying to write a story around this character. I'm trying to transpose personal negative emotions into more than just music, which is what I've already done so much of in the past. just the music to me, it was great. It's a great release. But with this, I have the opportunity to go further and write a story around the music that I feel is kind of like me telling my own story, but in this different world where anything's possible, and I can use anything as a metaphor. You know, I can use anything in that world. And I don't know, in terms of what people take from the project, I just want them to enjoy it in its entirety. You know, I want them to be able to listen to the new album and imagine the world that I'm creating, because there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to show them properly the world that I'm creating, because I haven't got Disney Marvel budget for a Sun's Journey Through the Night documentary or insane green screen music video.
But sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes, just like a lot of other things that you're doing, you can simply leave it to the imagination of those who are consuming it.
I think that's kind of it, I think it might be that I want to give them something. I want to give people something that they can use their imagination to kind of paint the picture of this music in their head. And that's why I try not to be too literal with showing imagery that has something to do with the story of the project. I mean, the artwork for Crawling Nebula of Dismal Light was a piece of art that I did, and it was supposed to kind of represent inner cathartic chaos and turmoil. And I think it kind of painted that picture quite nicely. And Eternal Black Transmissions before that, that was I wanted that artwork to be, this is the gateway, this is the start. And so I haven't been overly literal with imagery surrounding the world. I mean, there are some bands that do that. There's a great band called Wallowing, who are also on the same label as me on Church Road Records, and they've got a comic book coming out that kind of illustrates the world that they've kind of built around their music, and that's amazing. It's really, really cool. I'm a big comic book fan myself, and for me, I don't think that would work with this project, because I kind of want I want them to use their imaginations for it. And I mean, truly, without sounding too kind of, I don't know how this is going to come out, but I try not to think about how people are going to take the music. I try not to think about what other people are going to think these days about the imagery, the videos, the story, because I've had to learn through a lot of berating from 3 good friends of mine in the community, Spider God, the Oracle, and Revenant Marquise. A lot of berating from them that I need to not think so much about what people are going to think of this and just do it. Revenant being the main cheerleader of that train of thought. I mean, if you listen to his music, that guy's been unwavering in his vision for as long as that project's been going. So there's the 2 things really, is that I want them to use it, have their imagination kind of started up, kicked into gear, so that they can experience it through their own lens. But also I try not to think about too much about what people are going to think when they listen to it, because if I do that, then it's not going to be an accurate representation of what I want to make. So I think that's about it on that one.
No, well, first of all, man, that's rule number 1. You can't make music worrying what people are gonna think, because the moment you do, you are fucked. That's just not the way it works, especially within the context of black metal, where it is essentially at its core a counterculture movement. So it is supposed to be whatever you want it to be. It is supposed to be the anti. And you can use it however way you want to use it. That's the thing about it, is that it is, as far as being a subgenre is concerned, it's probably a wider genre of its own in terms of the sonic distribution to anything else that's out there in the world of music and culture. So I think, you know, the area that most of those bands and artists will have in common is perhaps more so the intent or the themes or the catharsis, as we keep coming back to it, rather than just what do these riffs sound like, you know. So I'm with you on that. I think where I was coming from with that question was mostly, you know, what to take away from it, you know. So that's a different thing to what you would think of the music. You know, that's mostly a thing of, you know, I guess I was thinking more in terms of legacy as such, but I think you already clarified that first by saying that you're basically trying to tell a story. And I think that's actually...
I think that, I think it's the story is probably one of them, but if I had to kind of pick a way that I wanted to kind of what I wanted to leave behind with the project, it's that I want people to believe that this in its own way, in its very strange way, in this very broad. I mean, I think black metal can be quite broad. It's a big genre with so many kind of small subgenres in it, and so many incredible artists doing incredible work in each of them. I would like to try and think that in its own right, it has a uniqueness to it. And that's what I've been trying to do from the start, is to not sound too much like other stuff, but try and wear my influences on my sleeve. It's a really tough question, but it's probably one of the only, I mean, there's been a few of the questions in this that probably one of the only interview questions I've had that's properly made me had to think. So,
good. I'm happy to hear that.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. Like, people ask me about the music and stuff, and I can give quite quick answers. But with that, in terms of kind of that, I don't know really. I mean, I would like for people to still be listening in 20 years' time and be one of those bands that people keep on coming back to.
That is, if there's any people left in 20 years' time, huh?
Yeah, well, we'll see.
They
might all look like me, you know.
Well, yeah, perhaps.
I mean, I think that's it. Cool. I mean, I'd like to be one of them bands that people come back to, and one of them bands that, you know, there's maybe a time in your life where you feel that you need that record, you need Eternal Black Transmissions, or you need to listen to Core and Nebula, or you know, hopefully the new album Worldless. I mean, there might be a time in your life where you think that album slots in perfectly for you, and it does what it needs to do for you in that moment. And then when you're out of that time, you can put it back on the shelf and you can go back on with your life. I mean, I've never wanted to be a band that's kind of constantly on rotation for people. I've always seen it as more of like a vehicle for my own emotions and other people's emotions. So to my mind, it would be fantastic to help in the way that this project has helped me with mine and get me through my difficult times in my life. It sounds kind of cliche to say that it would be, it'd be great if it could help other people through theirs, whatever negativity that is, or whatever difficult time that is. So yeah, I mean, I think that'd be a nice thought of a legacy to leave behind.
I think that's very well put, man. And at the end of the day, if the focus is purely just to be an expression of yourself, then perhaps it doesn't matter so much who looks at it in what way. The experience is unique to your own, and I guess it's like it's a buffet of emotions to which people can help themselves to or not. I guess that's what art is at the end of the day. It's a buffet of expressions and emotions and exchange, as we put it earlier.
Yeah, an exchange. Oh yeah, I'm gonna keep that in mind. But I think it always also comes down to priority, doesn't it? I mean, it's amazing other people can get, but at the end of the day, the very first priority that comes with writing this is that it's my vehicle for this sort of stuff. So I think that, you know, that's always my number one priority. But I think through that comes authenticity, which I think people are a lot more discerning and especially in black metal, I think they're a lot more discerning and intelligent when they listen to music. And I think they can spot bullshit a mile away. So I think if I wasn't speaking from a place of authenticity, I think especially the black metal community would have shunned me a long time ago.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, listen, brother, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you tonight. I thank you for the time, and I thank you for, again, choosing Iblis Manifestations to do the first interview of this format. I hope it's been worth it, and I hope everyone listening has enjoyed so far as well. But yeah, really good. Very happy to see the growth of the band. Really, really good to see where you're headed, and I'm sure this album is gonna do you a world of good. And I'm gonna stand by that. I'm gonna revisit this a year or two from now, and I'm gonna be like, "Ha, see, I told you so." So yeah, man, I'm looking forward to sharing the stage together in the coming months as well.
Yeah, awesome, man. I absolutely can't wait for Cosmic Void. We've got some amazing shows this year. 2 of them are with you guys, so that's going to be fantastic to actually get to meet you face to face. And thank you so much for having me on, man. It's a bit surreal to sit here in this mask and talk like in this way, but it's been a blast. And I've really enjoyed the honest dialogue that we've had. It's been great.
Absolutely, brother. This is what we do, man. Fuck yeah. Just before we head off as well, anything that you want people to come and check out, or anything to keep an eye out for? Where can they listen to the music? Where can they follow you if they don't already?
Of course. So the new album is called Worldless, and it will be out on the 28th of July this year. By the time this episode comes out, we'll have a new single called Void Walker, which will also be out, and that's got a music video for it. So go and check that out. There's going to be some more singles from that album before the release, so that's you check those out as well when they come out. We're on tour in June with the awesome guys in Spectral Wound across the UK. So cannot wait for that. It's going to be our first tour. Yeah, I mean, the tickets are flying for that. So if you fancy seeing Spectral Wound, who are an incredible band, and seeing Sun's Journey Through the Night as well, then please grab a ticket, come out and see us on those shows. You can find the dates on the Instagram. If you want to find us on Instagram, it's just the Sun's Journey Through the Night, and you'll find us.
Fantastic, man. Everyone, you heard no one. Go and check out everything that the Sun's Journey Through the Night has got coming up. Once again, thank you very much for the interview, and to anyone else listening, hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations. Bye-bye.